As filmmakers, we all know how tempting it is to chase after the latest gear. But the real question is, how much of that is actually making you money? I've tested a ton of equipment this year, but only a handful have actually made me more money, helping me land higher paying clients and ultimately creating a more efficient workflow for me. So in this video, I'm breaking down the specific equipment that actually made me more money in 2024. So if you're ready to start investing smarter and start seeing real results, then stick around all the way until the end of this video. A quick disclaimer though, this equipment is stuff that has helped my business grow, but I do know that there's a bunch of different filmmaking niches out there. So I really do think that depending on your niche, different gear is valued differently. For example, if you shoot real estate, then a gimbal is a high value instrument for your job. Whereas if you do corporate work where you're just doing interviews, then a gimbal might not be quite as useful. But I do think that the gear I share in this video works for most genres of filmmaking, but that's just something to keep in mind. So with that out of the way, let's get started. So the first piece of filmmaking gear that has made me more money this year is actually the M1 Max MacBook Pro. This laptop has completely revolutionized my workflow, and I think is probably the #1 factor for why my output has really grown this past year as a solo filmmaker. And it all really has to do with Apple's new M1 chips, or Mac chips essentially. I know we're on actually M4 now, but this is the M1 model that I'm using, and it still works flawlessly even though it's only 3 or 4 years old now. And what makes the M1 chips so special is the fact that they just cut through H.265 files, which is actually what my old Canon R6 Mark II exclusively shot on when you were shooting in log. Back when I was still editing on a Windows computer, when I used to bring those H.265 files into the editing software, they would be so choppy and horrible when it comes to playback that I was always forced to basically create proxy files. But ever since I got the M1 Max MacBook Pro, I haven't had to make a proxy like ever. I can just simply drag in my files into Adobe Premiere Pro and start editing immediately with no hiccups or no choppy playback whatsoever. And so that's been a huge game changer, especially because I think a lot more cameras are starting to encode in H.265 because it is a significantly smaller file size than the H.264 or something like a ProRes RAW. And so because of this MacBook, I'm actually able to get the best of both worlds. Extremely small file sizes with great video quality and decent and actually I would say really good editing performance. And that's not all. The M1 chip has a bunch of other benefits. It actually exports a ton faster. The whole Adobe suite works really smoothly and there's no hiccups when I use other programs as well. And Apple laptops don't necessarily need to be charged or plugged into a power source to be using their full CPU power. Whereas most Windows laptops, if you unplug it from power, their performance actually diminishes. And so I've actually been able to use this laptop when I'm in the backseat of a car or if I'm traveling on an airplane, and I'm able to get a ton of editing work done, not necessarily being plugged into a wall outlet. And the model I got was the 14-inch version, so it's slightly smaller than the fully decked out 16-inch version. But I think it works perfectly if you're someone who travels on the go and you're a creator that's constantly moving around. Once my Apple Care expires from the M1, I plan to update it to whatever the most recent M chip is available at that time. And then I might get a 16-inch version because I do think if you're going to be editing on here, you do want more screen real estate. And 14-inch is just the cusp of being almost too small. It works for me, but I think I would really appreciate those 2 extra inches on the 16-inch model. Now I won't harp on the M1 much longer, but I do want to make an honorable mention here, and that's for some of the plugins I got for Adobe Premiere Pro. I made a whole video outlining the 3 plugins I recommend for anyone using Adobe Premiere Pro, but a short list here is Firecut App AI, Mr. Horse, which is Premiere Composer I believe, and Premiere Gal's Toolkit. With these 3, you have a ton of features and a ton of ways to really maximize your editing performance and editing capabilities. All right, on to the second piece of equipment that made me more money this year as a filmmaker, and that's the Smallrig Freeblazer tripod. Now, a tripod normally is pretty boring, and the only real standout features is whether it has like a fluid head and how strong and sturdy it is for the ground so that it doesn't easily get knocked over. But the Smallrig Freeblazer tripod has one special feature that really stands out, and that's its latch system for the tripod legs. Normally, if you've used any other tripod, you'll have one, maybe up to 3 latches on each leg that you have to undo for certain heights. But the Smallrig one only has one latch for each leg that adjusts the height from the lowest setting all the way to its highest setting. And so it makes setting up and setting down this tripod super fast, super easy, and as we know, time is money when it comes to filmmaking. And of course, it does come with a nice fluid head system that works flawlessly. I've had no issues when it comes to panning, tilting, or any of those camera tripod moves. And so this has been a really good all-around tripod for me. And it is a little bit pricey. On the note of price, I believe it's around $300, $350, but it's an investment you only have to make once, and you won't have to change it for a very long time, so long you take care of it. But a pro when it comes to getting more expensive gear outside of not having to constantly replace it is that you can update your gear rental kit rate because of it. So 5% of $350 ends up being like $17 a day of rental for the tripod. And so that's a nice little bump up from like a rental fee for a $100 tripod. And that's not gonna, completely change and make you a millionaire or anything along those lines. But it is nice, and it has made me more money, and it's made my workflow so much easier. And so thank you, Smallrig, for this tripod. All right, on to the third piece of filmmaking gear that has made me more money in 2024, and that's actually the Rode Wireless Pros, and I'm actually wearing one right now. As you know, audio is more than half of the experience of video, and so having quality audio is paramount. And that's why I absolutely love the Rode Wireless Pros. Ever since we invested in the Rode Wireless Go 2s almost 2 years ago now, they've been pretty much on every single shoot that we've done for the last 3 years. And that was up until I got the Rode Wireless Pros earlier this year. And what makes the Rode Wireless Pros special are a few different features. Number one is its internal 32-bit float recording, meaning that you won't ever have to worry about an audio recording being too loud or too quiet, because you'll be able to adjust it in post using its 32-bit float recording. And since it has that internal recording, that means I can always have a backup of the audio just in case anything were to go wrong with the receiver on the camera. And both the Rode Wireless Go 2s and the Pros are very easy to use, and so they're very beginner friendly, and they really remove the hassle from what normally is kind of a very detailed role, which is audio. And what was really exciting for this model was also the fact that it comes with a charging case that you now can simply plug into your computer and transfer all the files at once. This was something that the Rode Wireless Go 2 struggled with. You had to connect each individual transmitter or receiver to the computer to adjust settings or to even capture the files. And so having just one cable with one charging case for all of them makes that file transfer portion of the job so much better. And the Rode Wireless Pro 2s comes with this secondary case, which is just a bunch of the accessories that come with it, like different attachments to smartphones or different cameras. And then of course it comes with 2 lav systems, so you can clip this lav and you'll have one for each transmitter. And they introduced this new little magnetic clip that you can use to sort of put under someone's clothing, and you can place the Rode on it, it'll clip on, and it'll hold pretty steadily. I don't use that one too often, but it is really cool that they added that in this new model. And so the Rode Wireless Pros really have paid for themselves over already at this point. Pretty much every single project I use the Rode Wireless Pros. The audio quality is great. They're super easy to set up. They're super easy to transfer files from and change settings on the computer. And I never really worry about the battery because the charging case is always keeping them charged. And I just charge the charging case maybe once a week or something like that. And so onto price, I think this one also was like around $300. Maybe it's on sale now, but it's definitely worth the money, and I think really simplifies the audio experience. Now let's talk about the fourth piece of filmmaking equipment that made me more money, which is the Lume Cube Studio Panel Kit. In fact, you're seeing one of the lights right now. It's off screen, but it's actually the orange light that's hitting me and creating this edge light on the left side of my body. I'm technically cheating because I did buy this closer to last year, but it has been a part of pretty much every single shoot as well, kind of like the Rode Wireless Pros, just because of how easy they are to travel with, and everything you get with the kit. Not only does the kit include the light and the stand, it comes with its own carrying case, the charging cables, the wireless remote, and a little hinge to attach so you can adjust the angle of the light if you'd like to. Now, these aren't like the brightest lights in the world, but they work for most indoor situations. Outdoors, they're not super useful during the day, but in the darker hours of the day, they definitely can be. And they're also one of those tools that's super easy to set up. They're lightweight and they're not hard to like adjust the settings. There's only 2 dials for brightness and color temperature. And so I am able to get a little bit of a color contrast, right? So typically what I used to do on these YouTube videos before I got this Man Billy light was actually have the 2 studio panel lights, one at 5600 and then the other one at 3200. And then I had a nice little color contrast in my image that helps, create some more depth and dimension. And what also makes these lights super convenient is that they don't need to be plugged into the wall to work. They have an internal battery. And so there's been many times where on a shoot, we can't find an outlet close enough for the light setup that we're trying to go for. And so the fact that these don't need to be plugged in and we can simply just carry them around and just turn them on and get to shooting was super nice. Granted, at 100% power, they only last about 90 minutes, but typically 90 minutes is more than enough time for us, especially since we're not doing interviews or long form sessions longer than that. But if we were doing longer form sessions longer than that, we would just try to charge it in between those moments. And what initially got us inspired to buy this light was actually the fact that it came with a travel bag and we were going to a traveling shoot. So we didn't want to bring our big aperture 120D with the light dome and everything. And so instead we brought this small carrying case that these Lume cubes come in. They come in very compact. We were actually able to put it onto the check-in bag and it was great. We were able to travel to 5 different states with that thing and capture all the content with a very lightweight, travel-friendly setup. So if you need something lightweight, easy to use, and travel-friendly, I highly recommend the Lume Cube Studio Panel Lights. Now I'm going to talk about something that's not super sexy, but actually has made me more money this year, and that's high-capacity, fast read and writing, SD cards, and CF Express type cards. And the specific brand I like is actually Lexar Pro, which I've heard is sort of iffy for some people, but for me, they've been perfectly fine. And I wouldn't say they're like a budget brand because I've definitely seen brands much cheaper than them with different capacities and write speeds, and they seem like they have different options depending on the quality of the SD card. But for me personally, the Silver or Silver Plus models have been fantastic and they read and write super fast for all the cameras I have. So back on my Canon R6 Mark II, I used to get the 256GB V60 Lexar Pro cards. And I think I got them kind of expensive and they were like $200 for a kit of 2. But now I think a kit of 2 is $100. And so they're really affordable and they're really fast. So you can record in 4K 60, no issues with that card. When I upgraded to the Canon R5 Mark II, I had to get a CF Express Type B card and a card that can shoot up to 8K just because, hell, I want to be able to shoot an 8K. And so I looked on Lexar Pro's website and I found that they had a 1TB like V1090 type CF Express Type B card. And then I got a 0.5 TB actually from ProGrade, and that was a V90 card. But nonetheless, the reason I highly recommend going for a high capacity and a fast read and write speed card is, number one, high capacity. You don't want to run out of space on a shoot. That's literally a nightmare situation. And video is very storage intensive, especially when you start getting into log or when you start doing 4K or 8K and then you start getting into ProRes RAW and all these other things. And so you really just don't want to have to be constantly either switching SD cards or trying to figure out which SD card has which memory and files on it. And so I highly recommend trying to get the largest storage your camera can handle, essentially. And 2, when it comes to the write and read speeds, the faster the better. Once again, this can go towards the fact that if you don't get the right speed, you won't be able to record in 4K, right? You need things in V30 and up for 4K typically. But the thing that I think stands out more from that is actually when you go to transfer the files from the SD card to your computer. Having the faster read and write speed allows you to transfer those files that much quicker. And I've experienced this firsthand when I was on a shoot with a second shooter who will remain nameless. But I remember at the end of the day, when I was trying to transfer files from his SD card to my laptop, I ended up waiting like 30-40 minutes versus when I used my Lexar Pros, and we had the same memory, mind you. So when I plugged in my SD card and transferred those files, it did it in 5-10 minutes or something along those lines. It was still a lot of storage, but that was like mind-blowing to me. And I really do think, once again, time is money. You don't want to be wasting time just transferring files from your camera to your laptop. You want to get that connection down to as short as possible so you can just get into editing and start uploading or whatever the case may be. And ever since getting my Canon R5 Mark II, it's been mind-blowing taking advantage of the CF Express Type B cards, especially when I'm offloading files. It's been crazy. I think I've offloaded almost 200 gigs and it was done in almost, I don't know, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, something like that. And so that would have taken me closer to like the 10-20 minute mark on my old SD cards. And so I'm definitely grateful for getting cards that are read and write super fast. And a final note on this, the reason I like the high capacity and fast read is that it also future-proofs you. If you ever do upgrade your camera, you won't need to necessarily update the SD cards if you got high quality SD cards. Now, all this gear has made me a ton of money this year, but it's gonna mean nothing to you if you can't even land a client. And so if you want a full guide about landing your first paid filmmaking client, then you want to check out my guide on that here. What filmmaking gear has made you more money this year? Let me know in the comments section below. I'm wishing you all the best of luck in your filmmaking career. Happy holidays. And if you're not watching this on holidays, I hope you're just having a great time. And I'll see you in that next video. Peace.